hope you're ready for this.
Gonna be fun.
You will not stand in my way.
Frostborn, hunger. This pleases me.
I do not fear you, mortal.
Your soul shall be mine.
Don't make me laugh.
Needs a brew?
Oh, I do.
Feel a shredding, baby. Let the battle begin.
Welcome to the 20th episode of Trollin HGC, a Heroes of the Storm podcast focused on esports and a member of the Trolls.gg podcast network. I'm Bahgz, and I've stolen hosting duties tonight from LiQuiuD because unfortunately, the dude's out sick, caught a stomach bug later in the day today. Hopefully he's getting better quick because I'm not cut out for this job. But tonight, I'm happy to be joined by Trent from Trent eSports blog. What's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's going to be a fun one. We have some very interesting things to talk about in the lead up to BlizzCon.
You know what it is? 'Twas the night before HGC finals is what I'm calling it. If I could find a way to make that rhyme and like fit the old adage, I would. That
would require far more preparation than we're willing to put into this.
And creativity that I don't have. So, all right. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to thank our patrons over at patreon.com. If you go to patreon.com and you search trolls.gg, you will find our Patreon where you can donate $1, $5, $10 a week. It's up to you. All the money goes back into the podcast. This year we used it to purchase BlizzCon swag. We have pinhole sunglasses. We've got these great t-shirts we're going to be wearing at BlizzCon. So again, if you enjoyed the content we are creating, consider looking us up and donating $1 or $2. Who knows?
Possibly $3 if you're feeling brave.
If you have the expendable $3, send it our way. As well, I'd like to thank our Troll of the Week. This week's Troll of the Week is Dorsch. Dorsch is found often in the Trolls GG channel in Heroes of the Storm. So always up for a game. Glad to have him as the Troll of the Week this week. This one's for you, Dorsch. Looking at you, man. Now that we've got the formalities out of the way, let's dive in to the news section.
Tonight on the Trolls.gg podcast network, Trollin HGC proudly presents Heroes Esports News, Notes, and Drama with your hosts, LiQuiuD and Bahgz.
All right. Now, that was our fancy new bumper. I hope you enjoyed it. Guys, last week we missed a thing. Blizzard announced that they're putting together a European World Cup thing for Europe. The best way I can think of describing it. It's called the Nexus Games. Basically, Blizzard is putting together teams of 5 players based on their performance in Hero League in Season 3 2017 up until October 24th, which was yesterday. The amount of Season 3 games that must be played is a minimum of 75 games, and the account must have a positive standing. HGC players are excluded from this, but Open Division players are welcome. So if you're an amateur player and you've been taking part in Hero League for your region in Europe, you have a chance to get selected by Blizzard for your team to participate as and represent your country in these Nexus games, as they're calling them. So the countries that will be taking place are Belgium, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Netherlands, Poland, Romania, Russia, Spain, Sweden, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom. It will be broken into 2 phases. There's a group phase and a playoffs phase. The group phase is seeding is determined by the combined rank points of each team member. So obviously, the more higher Grandmaster ranked players who have more rank points will add up to a higher seeding in the group phase. 4 groups of 4 will be played in a single round robin format. There'll be best of 3s, and the top 2 from each group will qualify for the playoffs. The playoffs will then consist of a single elimination bracket, which will all be best of 5s. That starts November 14th, and the player reveal and schedule will be released shortly after BlizzCon. So, again, the time limit to get your games in the deadline was yesterday. We missed this note last week, and I apologize for that. But for those who do have enough games in and are high ranking and would like to represent their country at the Nexus Games, now's your time to start lobbying for your place on your team. I believe they started the voting for which maps will be in the map pool as well today. I saw that tweet going out. So,
yeah, I'm interested in the voting for the map pool thing, because on the one hand, it's cool that it's not just Blizzard deciding it, but also communities have a tendency to be dumb when it comes to voting for actual competitive things. So I'm very curious to see if this ends up being a highly competitive, restricted map pool, or if everyone votes for Black Hearts and Warhead Junction for the memes.
We'll see. My vote would be for Warhead Junction. Competitive, as far as I'm concerned. I want to see shit blow up. So, I have a link in the show notes to the rules. So, guys, if you are curious, you can check it out. The show notes get posted with the show. The next thing I wanted to mention is Singularity. I don't know how many of you are familiar with other esports and other scenes, but they're a relatively big, they're a newer org, but they're a bigger org. They're from Denmark. They picked up the EU Open Division team, Never Lucky. Now, it's a little odd because Never Lucky did not qualify for the EU Open Division playoffs. They just missed out on it. They were the 9th team. Lauber hinted at this at episode 18 of the Trollin HGC when he guested on the show. I actually have the Twitch clip linked in our show notes as well. Again, Singularity is about a year old, so it's a relatively newer esports org. It's based out of Denmark, but they do have teams in League of Legends, Dota 2, CSGO, and Overwatch. So just an interesting note to me. Like, it's odd because, listen, Diamond Skin isn't picked up. They lost their sponsor in playing Docs, right? It's odd that the Leftovers still haven't picked up a team. So they must have picked them up on the cheap. That's the only thing I can think of. Unless someone in the Open Division team knows someone at Singularity and had an in. It's the only thing I can think of.
They're also not, like, none of their teams, just looking real quick at their stuff, they don't appear to be, like, a especially high caliber. Like, their League of Legends team isn't in the LCS or
is it a
anything
Challenger
like
Series
that.
team?
It seems that way. Like, I'm not familiar with the name either from the games that I follow, so it's probably a perspective. They got, like you said, they got them real cheap. They probably didn't want to invest what a team like Diamond Skin was going to require to get signed. And so they've got a team that, especially now with the ownership rules, if that team qualifies next split, they can sell off that spot for a profit. Because with amateur teams in scenes like this, you really don't have to spend a whole lot. You can give them like some mouse pads and the promise of future stuff and call it good, because a lot of people just kind of want to have a brand that they represent that has value to players.
Absolutely. So we'll see. That's the only thing I can think of is either someone has an in or they picked them up like literally dirt cheap. So, but it is nice to see that there is interest in Open Division teams for what it's worth. While we're still on the topic of, team movement, I also want to mention a little bit of player movement. Tiger, JK, and Talking Trees are both now free agents, formerly of Space Station Gaming. Space Station Gaming, formerly No Tomorrow, before they were picked up, got off to a hot start in Phase 2 and really stumbled there towards the end of the season. No other news as to why they were dropped. The only curious thing to me is it was before the player drop period, which starts after BlizzCon. There was some discussion about this on Reddit where a lot of players were like, oh, well, once they got told they were being dropped, they probably just wanted to get their foot in the door as soon as possible to get picked up by another team. My argument was that I feel like because the pro scene is such an insulated group that they all talk to each other, right? So at least, I don't know. I'm not a pro player and I really don't have that information, but I feel like they all communicate with each other. They all have a pretty good idea who's going to be dropped and who's going to be available. And the thing is it's not like they're not going to get tryouts, regardless of whether they say they're a free agent now or after BlizzCon. They have that connection with the other teams already.
So are you saying like they shouldn't have announced it yet?
It's just, it seems, like why are they announcing it now instead of after BlizzCon? There's Equinox went on Reddit and said there was like again, he's from one of the remaining members of Space Station, but like there's an kind of like an unspoken agreement right now with the pros. There's nothing keeping them from announcing that they're off a team right now if they already know they're off. It's just an unspoken agreement to try and keep it a little more professional and wait until the drop period.
So probably the reason for that is like everybody that's keeping it quiet right now is going to a team. So they don't want to start off their relationship with that team on bad footing. Whereas from reading their posts and everything, Tiger and Trees were just dropped. Most likely Space Station already has 2 players from other HGC or Open Division teams that are taking their spots. And so they've gone ahead and dropped them and probably are already practicing with the new members, or everybody's taking time off. And so like everybody's already making moves. There's no restriction. There's no poaching rules in the HGC right now, to my knowledge. So everybody's already, most of the rosters are already decided now. So Tiger and Trees have to do whatever they can to make it known that they're available to try and save their jobs for next season. And so they're probably, one, frustrated and venting their frustration because they weren't grabbed by another team. They were just dropped to make room for better players, or in the eyes of Space Station, better players. And so they're just trying to do whatever they can to make it clear that they're available.
Hey, I'm single now.
Yeah.
Hit me up. Yeah. I got
single
you.
And looking for fun.
Yeah. LFF. I guess the way I understood it, though, is, you know, there's a 1 week drop period and then there's a 1 week acquisition period. Now, they set it up a little bit differently, so it wasn't just all drops and moves in 1 week. So it was supposed to be set up so there was some sort of protection for these players that kind of just got blindsided by their drops and were left out in the cold as far as finding a team to pick themselves up. So if that's failing, and obviously we're not going to really know the dirty details until after the fact, all the teams are set up the way they're supposed to be. That's an issue that they'll have to address. But hopefully that's not the case, and that these are just jilted lovers, man.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing right now is there's no rules in place to prevent teams from going ahead and making handshake agreements. Like, probably nothing is signed and official at this point. But like, there are players from from different teams that live in the same house together. So like it's pretty easy. And I'm sure that a ton of players from different teams are all in various Discord chats and they all follow each other on Twitter. It's real easy for players on different teams to talk to each other and be like, hey, we're kicking Trees to the curb. You want in? Or for a player to say, hey, I'm getting dropped, or I want out of this team. You know, do you guys have space if I bounce? So like I said, all of those decisions are being made now. And so Tiger and Trees wanted to make it known that a decision
get the
was
word
made
out as soon as possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Now the big news, and the this is the one that you can really chew the fat on for a while. So Heroes announced a bunch of changes.
Strap in, people. We're talking about this for a little while.
Exactly. So buckle up, and I hope you got your listening ears on. So here we go. Heroes announces changes for the HGC in 2018. Now, let me pull up the link. This is very professional. Basically, the stream's going to be in 1080p now, 60 frames per second. This is good news. The other thing, they're changing up the way they're handling the minor regions and the clashes. So now the clashes are going to be treated kind of like the All-Star game in baseball, where like the winner gets home court advantage, or home field advantage. And in this case, it's like the winner of the clash, the whatever region they're from, gets an extra team at the next international. So in this case, if we were to use this most recent clash as an example, L5 won, so Korea would be sending Mighty to BlizzCon, and Fnatic won, so Europe would be sending Team Wish as well to BlizzCon. On top of that, the minor regions now are essentially no longer invited to the Clash. Taiwan does get invited to the Eastern Clash, but Southeast Asia does not. And ANZ and LATAM don't get invited at all to the Clash. Then, at these giant international events, there are only going to be two international teams. Or, I'm sorry, two minor region teams. There's going to be whoever wins between Taiwan and Southeast Asia. They're going to duke it out in calling it a wild card event. And same thing with LATAM and ANZ. They're going to duke it out in a wild card event to decide who goes to BlizzCon or the Midseason Brawl. And essentially, those other two minor region spots will be soaked up by a major region team. Now, there's a pro and a con to this. And the pro is that we have a more competitive international event because, let's face it, Team Wish is probably better than Red Cannons and Dark-Sided. So, I mean, less minor region is, it's the teams that are there will be more closely competitive. That's the best way to describe it. The con to this is it's less minor region exposure. It's certainly, as opening up the borders as they did for Phase 2 of HGC already, severely hurt the minor regions as Jay Shriek went to NA and Arcaner left for Europe. To me, this is like the death knell for the minor regions. This is Blizzard pulling out the stakes and sitting and just leaving them to fend for their own. They still haven't announced a league for the minor regions, and I don't think they intend to because I don't think there is enough popularity in those regions to support it. So that's what I'm getting out of it. It's a bummer and it feels bad, man, for the minor regions, but we do get more competitive internationals. That's the one way I'm looking at it. Did they say do the minor regions still go to the midseason brawl or? So they do. They do.
It's
midseason brawl is going to function exactly the same as BlizzCon. So the Phase 1 Clash will decide the extra team that goes to the midseason brawl. And then there will be a wild card event for these teams to qualify for the midseason brawl and a wild card event for these teams to qualify for BlizzCon. It makes me wonder if midseason brawl will actually be a 16-team tournament instead of a 12-team tournament like it was this past year. I don't believe they announced that, and I forgot that the hero site wasn't working in Chrome, so I have to open this link in IE, which I'm not going to do. So I'm going to ride the struggle bus through it and carry on.
So
the big thing is go ahead, actually, before I jump ahead of myself.
Yeah, I want to kind of break because there's a lot of there wasn't a lot of detail in the 2018 announcement. Like obviously we'll get more details down the road, but I do think this change, like the clashes, are really about getting some data about the rivalries in the regions, like EU versus NA, China versus Korea. The rest of it, for the average fan, it might be harsh to say, but it doesn't matter. Like the wildcard teams, it's neat, but we have enough history in games like League of Legends and Dota, in Overwatch. The minor region teams just don't ever have the opportunity to be competitive with the teams from the major regions. There's just too much disadvantage. There's not enough good practice partners. It's just not a thing. And so I think there's still the midseason brawl and BlizzCon where they get their chance to kind of get their opportunity to be on the stage. But the clashes now, like you said, are a competition. They're really, they can be billed more as these rivalry events to see, okay, how deep is Europe compared to NA? Like, is Fnatic amazing, but then Roll20 and Tempo are the next two best? It really kind of lets us build those rivalry stories rather than just kind of being an international celebration event like the midseason brawl is going to be now. Which I kind of am in favor of. I think it's better for storylines. I think it's more it definitely stinks for the other guys in the minor regions, but when you're thinking on the grand scale, hopefully Heroes will broaden to the place where those minor regions have a more competitive local scene to where they can actually have stuff locally and not be so reliant on international events.
You know what? My biggest thing is like my biggest concern is there. I feel like we're going to have more competitive tournaments, and there was a lot of fans that were in favor of this. Like when they heard this, you scroll through Reddit and you kind of just you get a feel for the pulse of it. A lot of these guys felt that yes, we're going to have a more competitive scene. This is exciting. This is what we wanted. We're getting more teams from the major regions. This tournament's going to be way better. But the other, the flip side of this coin is, I don't know how many people from Brazil watch Heroes, but it's a relatively well-populated country. Red Cannons is their team. It's an entirely Brazilian team. It won't be at this tournament because of visa issues, but it is an entirely Brazilian team. So I feel like, aren't you going to, if they don't qualify, do you feel like you're hurting yourself viewership-wise, numbers-wise, where less people are going to be watching now?
It doesn't, like, that's such a small percentage of the total viewership that, because Heroes is not a super popular esport. It's like a tier 2, tier 3 esport right now. And so unless a region is so overwhelmingly a fan of the game that it significantly affects viewership, like it's all kind of percentages. So like the Heroes is not a super popular game in any region. The stream numbers are not great in any region comparative to major esports. So losing a percentage of a smaller country is just really not going to do a ton for you when you can build better relationships with the other regions. You can build better storylines in the regions where the game is more popular and possibly draw more viewership and draw more interest from those major regions. I
get it. They're hitching their horse to where the game is being successful. I made this argument with Bahgz. It's, I don't know what they're making money on, but they're having success with the major regions. So continue to push that advantage, right? There was this famous StarCraft quote. There was a caster who said, when you're winning, just win more, right? Who was it that said that? Gosh, it'll come back to me, or chat'll let me know. Also, I don't have moderating privileges in our Twitch chat, but we lost the Roll20 manager. He all his messages have been deleting. He's dead on arrival.
Please don't actually ban him. He's my friend.
Yip boss feels bad, man.
I was joking. I'm sorry.
All right. Now to the meat and potatoes of this move. What's up with the ownership thing with these teams? Like someone has to, these teams have to incorporate. They have to become an LLC. Like, does a player have to pick up ownership? Do they have to designate a sixth person to be the owner of the team? If they're not owned by an org, does the org own the team? It's a mess, and we don't have any information. This was my biggest takeaway from this announcement, by the way, was the complete lack of information was so frustrating. Like, I'm going to let you talk about this, but I just want to rant for a second. All right. Like,
go for it.
We don't have any information about LANs for the Crucible or the playoffs. Like, I feel like the Crucible and the playoffs both should be LAN events. The Crucible is such a huge event. You throw that in your new Blizzard arena, you think that could get bigger numbers. It already gets bigger numbers in the HGC playoffs. That could get clash numbers. You know what I mean? Like that's a big event. You put that at LAN, that's huge, and that's what sponsors want. Now maybe it's not so bad to pick up a bottom tier team, and the playoffs should be LAN as well. Let's be real about that. It's supposed to be a big event. Let's treat it like one. You have that beautiful arena. Let's use it, Blizzard. Make that announcement. Make that happen. If you're not going to do a completely LAN league like League does, you're not ready to take that step yet, then at least your big events, make them LAN. I need that announcement. I was really disappointed we didn't get that. That bothered me a lot. All right, now let's talk about the ownership thing. Go.
All right. So to quickly address that, neither thing is going to be LAN. They would have announced it. So I'm sorry to break your heart, but I don't think we will see any LANs added to the schedule in 2018. And Charles, I'm so sorry that my joke. I need to get a Trent eSports Twitch handle because nobody knows who I actually am when I type in Twitch chat. Sorry about that. But so it's not in Blizzard's best interest to create more LANs because they're already bleeding money. Like, for anyone that doesn't know it, everyone in esports is losing money right now, except maybe Riot. But like esports itself at this point pretty much does not generate significant revenue for any game developer. What it does is it creates advertisement that is kind of self-replicating. So people watch the game, and then people like us talk about the game, and then I write blogs about the game, and then we all go on Reddit and talk about it there. It's aspirational, so it keeps players in the game. It allows you to better advertise skins to your hardcore fans. It's kind of a retention tool more than it is a revenue generating process. And a lot of companies are just Valve does not make a ton of money from the international. They make some because that singular event is so successful, and they don't pour a ton of money into leagues and regular content. They kind of just have the international. It's like Evo for fighting games. Like most fighting game tournaments lose money. Evo makes a ton of money because it's Evo. It's the only thing that matters in the year for most fighting game fans that are really casual. And so many people go that one thing makes money, but people see that, and so they think, oh, all fighting game tournaments make money. No, most of them bleed like 20 grand. Like there's a series in Boston called Shine that's a Smash Brothers tournament that for the last 2 years in a row has literally lost 20 grand to run the tournament. And that's how most of esports is right now. And Heroes is exactly the same way. So anything else that they do is going to just lose them more money right now. In 5 years, it might pay off if Heroes gets more popular and they fix some of the things that are affecting viewership right now. But they're losing money. So to add a LAN, it would have to be a really worthwhile proposition. And right now, the Crucible is not great. It's only 2 teams, and most of the open division teams are not hyper competitive. Like we kind of knew that the 2 teams this time were going to qualify, and we kind of knew the other 2 teams weren't. So putting that on LAN is not really going to draw much more interest. And the playoffs in like the playoffs in the HGC right now are not real playoffs. Because I correct me if I'm wrong, but like the team that qualifies for BlizzCon doesn't play in the playoffs. Like the team that has the best record in the regular season doesn't play in the playoffs, right?
Correct. And in the phase 2 playoffs, it's the top 2 teams do not participate, and it's
right.
just the playoffs from the next 4 teams doing a step ladder bracket.
Yeah, so it's not actually a true playoffs to decide a North American champion or a European champion. It's a gauntlet to decide the 3rd place team for BlizzCon. Who cares? Like, some people care, and some people watch it, but it's not really a playoff. It's not like the League of Legends North American playoffs where you're crowning TSM for the 12th time as the North American region champions who not only had the best record in the regular season, but then went through a single elimination bracket and went to grand finals and played a best of 5 against another team that made a crazy run through the bracket, and now they're the North American champions. Like that's what a playoff is, and that's not what the HGC playoffs are. I like the format. I like the way that they qualify teams for BlizzCon. It's actually more rewarding and consistent to have a better chance of actually sending your best teams to BlizzCon, but it doesn't create a playoff. And so putting that on LAN, it doesn't have the same gravitas of like a League of Legends playoffs where the 6 best teams from the regular season qualify and then play like a mini invitational tournament. So you would put that on LAN because that has more value. So that until that changes, I don't think we'll see those 2 things brought to LAN as much. Like, I'm all for more LANs. I want the league to be LAN. Like I'm going to push for that until it happens. Like I want that giant arena, like you said, to like to be the place where all the teams live. I want there to be a similar thing in Europe where all the teams live. And I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon because, again, money is a thing, and most of these teams don't have the structure in place to support doing that. So we're probably not going to see that, sadly, for probably another year or two. I don't think there's going to be any more lands added.
Okay. To me, like, I think going straight to the league land was too big of a leap. And I just felt having the Crucible be an event or the playoffs as a LAN event was a nice compromise. And I feel like I'm not going to get that. And you might be right. To me, the Crucible is I don't know. I guess it is only 2 teams, but it's 4 teams from each region. It's 2 days, 1 on each day. They're best of 7s. I don't know. It's hard to say. And then with the way the player movement works, we could have at least one competitive team every single split. I would still argue that something like that on LAN would be huge, especially for, like, what happens is a team like Imported Support is essentially an East Coast based team, and they've been forced to play LiQiuD, who gets to choose their server, which is West Coast. So they're at that disadvantage where when you're playing for something as important as a salaried job, playing on LAN would be the most ideal situation. Maybe it's not worth the investment. I would understand that. I guess if I had someone just straight up say that to me, like, if, Blizz Milkfat just tweeted at me and said, "Hey man, we can't do it. It's just money's not there." I'd be like, "All right." But until I have that, it just seems like a missed
until
opportunity.
A Blizzard employee says so.
Yeah,
we're going to keep cheering for LANs.
Yeah, I'm going to keep griping about it.
Yeah. Now, hashtag more LANs. I'm 100% in favor of it. But it probably is just not in the cards. I do think there is a point to be made, though, about competitive integrity and, like, the fact that choosing your server can be such a big deal. Hopefully, as the organizations continue to grow, invested in. So maybe we can't do a huge, big production LAN, but maybe we can get all of leftovers or all of Imported Support to the West Coast to be in the NVIDIA boot camp space or like the Red Bull offices or something, so that they're playing with the best ping, so that it's as even as possible. I think that would be an interesting compromise.
That'd be a nice baby step if we could work that out, and probably a lot less than putting together a big LAN event. So
with that out of the way, let's talk about ownership.
Yeah, let's hear it. I want to hear your thoughts on this. I don't get it.
I saw a couple of comments in the chat that I want to address to kind of explain what's happening here. So like you said, there really wasn't a bunch of detail in the announcement about this, but essentially what's happening now is previously the way that ownership worked in the HGC was that basically your spot in the HGC was owned collectively by 3 members of your team. So as long as 3 members of your team stayed together, your team owned that HGC spot. And it also meant that essentially controlling interest in that slot has been owned by the players. So, for example, a team like Superstars owns their spot. And even if they get a sponsor, unless that sponsor doesn't specifically have something in their contract that says we get ownership of the HGC spot, and I don't even know if that's legal with the way, like, I haven't read the HGC contracts for players or anything, so I don't know if that's even a thing you can do, but the players own their spot. So what Blizzard is doing now is they're saying that active players can no longer just own the spot by having majority. They now have to declare an entity as the owner of that spot. So essentially, I don't know the exact specifics of it, but just to use an example, so we've got Superstars who don't have an actual official organization, but what they're going to have to do now is they're going to have to incorporate or in some way create an organization that is separate from the players. It might still be run by the players while they don't have anybody else, but it's a separate entity that owns that spot. And so that entity is going to continue to own that spot even if all of those players go away. So the spot in the league is separate from the players on that team. So, for example, there were a bunch of teams that were grandfathered into this. So Fnatic owns their spot outright. It's basically just been taken from the players. The players don't own that spot. Fnatic owns that spot. Now they can kick out all 5 members and replace them with 5 players from the open division, and they have every right to do that, and they'll keep their spot. Gale Force. If Gale Force, there's rumors that Gale Force is going to completely implode. Gale Force still owns that spot. They can rebuild their team however they want to. They still own that spot. I don't know how that's going to interact with the rules that caused V-Step to disband, but my guess is that as long as teams can field a competitive roster, they're going to keep their spot. So like Gale Force can theoretically blow up their roster, rebuild it from scratch, and still be Gale Force instead of losing their spot and the open division team with the best record coming in and taking their spot, like what happened last season. There are still roster restrictions. To my knowledge, they've been increased to you can change 3 players instead of just 2. I don't think that's been confirmed anywhere.
Yeah, I haven't seen that sourced anywhere. People have been talking about that. I've seen DB mention it on Reddit, and I don't know if that was like a slip of the tongue that there is going to be unlimited roster moves or something like that coming up.
And there should be, honestly. And again, I hate to keep going back to League of Legends, but it's the one that has a successful league and has for 6 years, so we're going to compare to it because it's worked. Like, there's a bunch of problems with the LCS that we can get into if we're on a different show, but it's the league that works, and this is how it works in the LCS. The organization owns a spot, and they can blow up the team, they can sell the spot, they can do whatever they want to field the most competitive roster possible. And that's how all sports work.
So I was going to ask you that. So now the LCS is just transferring over to a franchise model now. Mm-hmm. But how did it work before? Because I understand there was the Challenger Series and teams got relegated and teams got promoted. So say Cloud9 has a spot, and I think this happened. That team gets relegated, but Cloud9 they ultimately ended up staying in the league. Did they just pick up they purchased the team that's coming up?
So that didn't happen to Cloud9 because Cloud9 has basically from day one been top 3 in the league. But there have been organizations that have come in and essentially just bought a spot. So like Immortals is a really big name in esports now. They started, and it's kind of funny that we have the Team 8 of Heroes. The Team 8 of League of Legends kept their spot. So they got 7th place, which meant they got to stay in the league because it's a 10-team league. You don't get relegated if you're in 7th place. But their roster had a bunch of top players that wanted to retire. It was a very tiny organization. They literally only had the League of Legends team, and they could barely afford salaries for them because they weren't a very successful team. And so the owners of Team 8, the organization, sold their spot to Immortals, which was a company that was started by a group of investors that wanted an esports team. And so to get an esports team, they just paid thousands of dollars to a dude named Eric who owned Team 8 to get his spot in the LCS. And now they're an LCS team, and they have been for a long time.
So essentially, if I'm understanding the way you're describing how League functioned pre-franchise model, mm-hmm. and how Blizzard is transitioning the HGC to this league ownership model, it's going to be very similar, right? So someone's going to own a spot unless they get relegated?
My understanding is it's going to be identical. From what I can tell and from what I understand and from talking to people, it's going to basically be the way that the LCS began, which was the spot is owned by an entity, and that entity can do whatever they want with that spot. They can blow up the roster and bring in a bunch of Koreans. They can, which you can't do in the HGC because there's still region restrictions, which are another thing that we can talk about another time. But essentially, that entity can do whatever they want with the roster. And what's interesting, so there's kind of 2 points to that issue. First is ultimately long-term from a macro perspective, this is great for the league. This is better for the stability of the league, for the longevity of the league. It makes it better for teams and organizations to invest in the HGC. It gives investors who get in an out to turn a profit. It gives teams more freedom to field the roster that makes the most sense. It protects a team like Niantic from being trapped in the same cyclical, we can only change 2 players and we have more problems than that with our roster. So it's ultimately long-term great for the long-term success and structure of the league. It super duper sucks for the players right this second, because if effectively what it's done for a team for a team like Wish, let's use Wish as an example. So Team Wish, the players that were Zealots signed with Wish to be their sponsor, and they're essentially an advertising arm of Wish.com now. They get a salary, they're partnered with Wish, they tweet about how they bought stuff on Wish, and it's all real great. But the players still effectively own the spot. So Wish doesn't have the authority to sell the spot off to another organization, to blow up the roster, to the players have some protections because they ultimately still own the spot. If the players all hated Wish, they could just all disband, like threaten to leave the team, and they have that negotiating power with Wish because Wish would lose their spot in the HGC if all the players left. So it gives the players way more negotiating power. What Team Wish is going to have to do now is give all of that control to Wish.com. In order to have Wish be their sponsor in the HGC now, they're going to have to give total ownership of that spot to Wish, which means now Wish can sell that spot off for a profit. Wish can blow up the roster if they want. Wish has all of the negotiating power because effectively now the Wish players are employees of Wish who owns the spot. So the teams like them, like Space Station, these teams that don't have these grandfathered in owners or organizations have to decide, do we want to burn our relationship with this sponsor to the ground by refusing to give them ownership, or do we give up all of our ownership and all of our chance and negotiating power to this organization that we've been working with for 4 months?
So when you say grandfathered in, like Gale Force would be a good example. What is, like, do the players get to keep control of that team, or is Gale Force going to own that?
Gale Force now owns it. The players got no say, to my knowledge. If someone from Blizzard can correct me on this, I from the people I have talked to and the research I have done, the way that I understand it is effectively the teams with established organizations like Gale Force, Tempo, Dignitas, Fnatic, LiQuiud, these big names in eSports got grandfathered in, and Blizzard gave them control of their spots. So to my knowledge, the players did not get a say in that. The players did not get to make a decision. Their spot was given to that organization that was grandfathered in.
Okay. So that's what you mean by grandfather. So the difference between teams that got grandfathered in, these are teams that were already in the league pre phase 1, we'll say, or pre phase 2. And those orgs automatically in control of that spot in the HGC. But the relatively newcomers, like your Space Station and your Team Wish, these teams are going to have to negotiate with the players. And it's probably, I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist, but it's probably going to, the players are going to have to forfeit it, right? Because
well, they're going to have to forfeit it if they want to keep that sponsor, because I would imagine.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, it's the it's the decision to keep your sponsor that you have or potentially get a better sponsor down the road. So like Wish, using Wish as an example again, they had a really good end to their season. They have a ton of potential, and Wish is brand new in esports. They don't have the experience of a Renegades or an Immortals or something, or a Cloud9. If Wish wants to bet on themselves, they could refuse to give Wish the ownership and play as a free agent organization and say, like, we're now Zealots Incorporated, owned by, you know, 2 players who sign an LLC or whatever, in order to then have the negotiating power with an organization in the future for better salaries, better benefits, all of those things. Or they can stick with the organization they know and, you know, risk the future. Maybe Wish suddenly one day stops paying. We don't have any history of how Wish conducts their esports dealings. They seem great. I interviewed them for an article, and they were very happy to talk to me. They're real excited and passionate, so they seem great. But it's kind of it's a risk, and you're kind of asking these 20-year-old kids with no legal experience to make an incredibly difficult tactical negotiating decision.
Yeah, I don't envy the position. If I had to guess, if I was a betting man, I'd say that they're probably going to let the orgs get that negotiating leverage over them. Though I could be wrong. It just seems to go from being sponsored to not sponsored, it might not be worth it.
I would imagine most teams will. The teams that wouldn't want to are teams that are in a position where they've had a ton of success and potentially their sponsor doesn't have the ability to pay them what they're worth. So like if Space Station had won the league, if they had gone, you know,
they were at BlizzCon right now.
If they were at BlizzCon right now, Space Station is a teeny tiny organization in the grand scheme of esports. They don't have the money to pay what Gale Force pays. Like, no disrespect to them at all. They seem like a great organization. They just don't have the capital that a Gale Force or a Tempo has. So it's unlikely that they can pay a salary that's competitive with what the Gale Force guys have been getting. So if you were Space Station, you're like, boy, we look solid. We look awesome. We are worth more than what Space Station can pay us. Do we really want to give Space Station ownership of this spot and effectively all of the negotiating power to keep our contracts the same, not pay us anymore, not, you know, pay competitive salaries with these other teams? Or do we bet on ourselves for 6 months, win the league again, and negotiate with an organization that's a higher tier, that has more connections, has more sponsors? It's a tough decision. I don't even know what I would advise every team if they came to me at this point, because it's a huge risk to make. But anytime you're giving up that much power in a negotiation effectively for no benefit. I mean, it does not benefit the players of Tricked Esports at all to give over ownership. I mean, it is literally the opposite of that. It does not benefit them in any way to do that, but it's also the only way that they keep their sponsor. So what do you do?
I probably keep my sponsor, but that's up to them. That's the decision they're going to have to make. Now, Rush Hot's had an interesting question. He asked, what would happen if the team owner was playing Ducks, for example, and they don't play the players? What then? Now, as I understand it, Blizzard would have a lot more leverage over these orgs now, because right now it's like the orgs are hands off, right? They're like, yes, we're playing the players, but really, like, Blizzard has no leverage over them, because it's the player. The contract is between the players and the org. Now the contract essentially is between the org that pays the players and them owning a spot in Blizzard's league. So if they, step out of line, now Blizzard has ways to reprimand them.
Yes. So, and Stack Pointer in the chat makes a really good point. Orgs have been punished and fined in the LCS for bad behavior. So poaching, CLG was accused and found guilty of poaching a couple of times, and they were fined by Riot. Teams that didn't pay their players or had really shady business practices were banned. Owners have been banned from ever owning a team again. That's why there's no Renegades in the LCS anymore, because the owners of Renegades were banned from owning an LCS spot. So Blizzard does now have more authority to police a team like Playing Ducks. And so if the players came to Blizzard and said, our org hasn't paid us in 4 months, they haven't honored their contracts, they were supposed to pay our travel to this LAN and they didn't, they were supposed to provide us with a boot camp and they didn't, Blizzard can step in now with authority and with a contract and force the orgs to pay penalties, to suffer consequences where they really didn't have that. And they can bar ownership. So like if Superstars, if like the dude that owned King of Blades that were super gross and shady somehow tricked Airho and the guys into wanting to start King of Blades again, Blizzard can now say, no, we're not allowing you to own a spot in our league, so we're going to block that transaction and kill it, and the guys of Superstars can't do anything about it. Like that guy can't own that spot. So like I said, ultimately in the long term for the league, this is the way it had to go. This is the way it should have been from the beginning. This is kind of the problem that happens when you force an esport. Like League of Legends, when the league started, there were more established organizations. The owners of every team had an established organization and an owner that was separate from the players. A couple of them, the players, like the player was still the owner, but had owned the organization for a year or two. So every organization was a little bit more established, a little bit more solid. That just hasn't been the case yet in Heroes. So it kind of would have been tough with so many unsigned teams to start the HGC this past year that way. But it's the way that it needed to go. It gives Blizzard that control. It makes it safer for organizations to invest because they actually own the thing they're investing in. It's better for the league long term. It just really puts the teams that are in those unique situations right now in a really awkward spot. Especially those teams that are like at BlizzCon now and like Expert. I don't believe Expert was grandfathered in, and if they weren't, like they're having to figure out all this stuff while they're prepping for BlizzCon.
I hope not. Hopefully they were grandfathered in it, but who knows? I'm really glad that you were kind of able to sift through this and really put it in layman's term for me and the listeners, because I didn't really understand what it meant and how it was going to shake down. I guess the bigger issue is what's this do for? Could you explain what this does for teams that don't have an org? Like, what are they going to do?
At this point, they're going to have to make up an org. They're going to have to get a little bit more official with it. Someone's going to have to actually own the organization and handle payroll and award it. Like someone's going to be responsible for paying out the cheers. A lot of that stuff will be put on the organization as a responsibility. Disciplining players, there will be more expectation of that on the organization. So leftovers, Superstars, these teams are going to have to create an organization that is run by someone. They're going to have to most likely, incorporate, pay taxes as a corporation, handle payroll as a corporation, all those things. Blizzard has said a couple times that their goal for 2018 is every team has a legitimate sponsor.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that they're going to be pushing for that harder. I know in other
this certainly
games,
was a step towards that.
Yes, this is a
huge
step towards that. And I know other games, for example, Paladins, their professional league is a partnership with the WESA. So every team in the Paladins Pro League has to be owned by a WESA team. And they all are. So Blizzard can, if one of their goals really is like to make sure that every team has a legitimate sponsor, they have a lot of pull to be able to get more involved in attracting sponsors, setting them up with players, possibly creating incentives for organizations to sign a Heroes team, kind of doing what they're doing so successfully with the Overwatch League. Like they've convinced people with no esports background to invest $20 million in the Overwatch League. They can probably talk to Immortals about, taking a low risk investment in a Heroes organization.
I mean, it's not like they're throwing a little bit of money, a lot of money away. It's not like you got to spend $10 million to get a Heroes spot. It's probably less than $1 million.
Well, a Heroes spot, the players, and them giving you control of the spot. Now, players on these free agent teams should know that their spot has some value and expect, in addition to a salary, a transaction fee of some sort for
a bonus,
giving away,
essentially a signing bonus, right?
You're giving away your stock options, essentially.
Yeah.
So that has inherent value beyond just your player salary because you're trading away controlling interest in a company.
Well, you're part owner of a spot in a league that has value,
exactly.
And that could go up, and probably will. I mean,
exactly. And that's also something for players of existing organizations to keep in mind when they're renegotiating their contracts. So, like, let's say that Gale Force blows up their roster next season. They're potentially about to be relegated or something, and Gale Force says, "You know what? I'm bored of throwing money at Heroes. I want to just, do whatever." And players might want to negotiate like a transaction, like a percentage of that transaction. Like, for example, like let's say Michael Udall, if he was still on the team, like Michael Udall's a draw for Gale Force. He's one of the reasons that team has value. Right. So if that roster and that slot got sold with Michael Udall still on the team,
where's my cut?
Yeah. Where's my cut? I'm part of the reason that this spot has value to you. Give me some of that money.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's a lot more contractual negotiation stuff that you kind of have to know now with the HGC that wasn't there 2 minutes ago before all of this stuff was brought in. So it's going to make the free agent period after BlizzCon even more interesting, which I'm very excited about.
That is a ticking time bomb. Well, I want to move on from this. I need to get through the BlizzCon section portion of the show still. We only have about a half hour, well, a little more than a half hour left, but I want to move on. But before that, I want to thank you. It was a little confusing the way it was all worded. It was very vague. The way you described it made it very easy to understand. It was very digestible. I believe the fans are going to agree. I understand it now. Essentially, it's not franchised, but it's kind of like a franchise. The spots are going to be owned by an organization, not by the players. Much smoother transition when we run into situations where teams blow up, and it's it's a lot more appetizing to orgs. This is going to be a good thing. I feel after having you describe that to me in the long term, much more sponsorship friendly. Let's put it that way. And with that, let's hop over to the BlizzCon section.
The hook is going to help out, and we're going to see Stitches fall as well. It's going to be a 1-for-1 trade. It's the 1-for-1 trade as we once again have the Dragon Blade used on the side of Genji. He's trying that in. Dashes out, sail yellow.
That was just about the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life.
It's a dance party, and you're invited.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HGC Western Clash.
All right, so BlizzCon. listen, we've had a lot of information come out. Some of this is going to be a little old, but I still want to bring it up. We've been working on the notes for this section for a long time. Last week we were supposed to talk about it, ran out of time, but 'twas the night before HGC finals at Burbank in the group stage, and all was quiet. You couldn't even hear
that rolls off the tongue.
A mechanical keyboard click. Until tomorrow, when Group A pops off. But before that, let's talk about the patch they'll be playing on. So it was scheduled for the Junkrat patch with Junkrat, and then there was a lot of feedback about how that was such a terrible idea, and Blizzard backtracked and said, okay, we're not going to do it with the Junkrat patch. We're going to do it with the Junkrat patch, but we won't do it with Junkrat. He won't be included. I had some discussion with Aether on this, the coach of Team Freedom, on the pros and why pros don't like big patches too soon. I have the whole Twitter conversation linked in our show notes. Basically, what it comes down to is there's not enough time to prep. And my argument was, well, it's kind of like they get like a week and a half, almost 2 weeks to prep. Why isn't that enough time to prep? Well, here's the thing. Scrims are one thing, but figuring out how he fits into comps and how to play against them. But it's another thing these players got to use them in Hero League, Quick Match, Unranked Draft. They have to mechanically get themselves familiar with it. There's so many different variables involved. There's so many. It's like an onion. There's just layers and layers of learning a character and how he's going to affect the meta. That just getting a week and a half of scrim practice with him is not enough. They need to play with him by himself before they even bring him into scrims. So that was what I got out of it. On top of the fact that this is a pretty big balance patch. There was a Muradin rework and a Zul'jin rework too, as well. And how is that going to affect everything? On top of bringing in a new character. It's also going to be the first time we see Anna competitively. How's that going to work out? So, also, Yitboss, I don't know if he's still in chat, but he brought it up on why it was flip-flop. Now, originally, I thought it was just because of the fan uproar. I thought because the fans were going crazy, the pros were going crazy, the Blizzard was like, oh, we'll backtrack, and I kind of didn't like that because I'm not a big fan of flip flopping. I feel like if you make a decision, you need to stick with it. It's a little more professional looking than just kind of I don't know. At the same time, I do appreciate it that they listen to their fans and they're always trying to put out the best product that they want. Sometimes I worry about that. But Yitboss pointed out, and I have the link to this as well. There's a point in the notes where these teams. The teams aren't allowed to play new heroes if they haven't been out for 2 weeks, but it also, I guess, the way the rule book works, it's a little vaguely worded, but Blizzard also isn't allowed to force a character out too soon on these players, essentially. So the fans went out, the players went out of their way to point out that, listen, we're not allowed to bust out a new character, and you can't be busting out a new character on us too soon when we're not ready. So essentially, that's what it came down to. So we're going to be playing on the Junkrat the Junkrat patch, but without Junkrat. So, and Dorsch brings up a good point. Maybe it is more professional to realize you made a mistake and fix it than force it. I don't know.
Yeah, Blizzard's in a tough spot. If you listen to Garrett Weinzierl of Into the Nexus, Angry Chicken, all that stuff, he talks constantly about how it's frustrating as an esports fan to be playing a different version of the game than what you're watching in esports. And being too far behind makes for a worse product for the viewer and the spectator, but a better product for competitive integrity and preparation. So you really kind of have to find that balance. And I think Blizzard just kind of leaned a little bit too far on the making it more interesting for spectators side. And the only way to do that is at the detriment of the players who are playing for the World Freaking Championship. So you kind of have to find that balance. And I think they just didn't spend enough time thinking about where that balance would lie. And chose to do a huge patch as the
on top
right
of it
before BlizzCon.
Yeah.
Maybe push those reworks to December instead of going ahead and rolling them out right before your World Championship.
So I get it. Listen, I'd love to see Junkrat at BlizzCon as well. It's exciting, and I understand that he's the new hype, and we want to see him play professionally. I do get that, but they can do show matches for that. Personally, maybe it's just not the same thing, but it's what they did for Volskaya. I thought that was very interesting. We're not going to see Volskaya there. You know what I mean? So to me, I thought the middle ground was 1 week. and I guess it's not enough time. To me, in my head, I was like, 2 weeks is kind of too long. And this is as a viewer. This is how I felt. 2 weeks is kind of too long. It's almost like Junkrat's almost old, and we're getting ready for like the next year release before he's even on. Like, that's to me. But from what I hear, it's not enough time for the pro scene, and I want these guys to be playing at top tip. I don't want sloppy games at the World Championship. I want these to be crisp, and I want them to be awesome. And that's
if Junkrat is good, you would have gotten some sloppy games.
So there you go, and that's what we don't want at BlizzCon. So that's why they don't do it. 2 weeks seems to be the sweet spot. I don't know what League does. We keep going back to it.
It's 2 weeks.
It's 2 weeks. So there you go. There's a model that's working. Emulate
it's 2 weeks
and then
in Paladins. It's 2 weeks in Overwatch. It's 2 weeks is kind of what everybody has decided is the thing.
Okay. If it works, it works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't try and change it up just to make some more money and sell some more Junkrat skins. All right?
There you go.
All right. And then let's take a look at the bracket. So Group A starts tomorrow. That group is MVP Black, CE, Tempo Storm, and Deadly Kittens. I also have linked DB Smiley's tweets where he lists the ELO of all these teams. So the number 2 team by ELO is MVP Black, 1791, followed by CE, which is actually ranked number 11 by ELO at 1575. Tempo Storm comes in 13 with an ELO of 1540, and Deadly Kittens sits at 1367. Now LiQuid's not here to share his picks. And last week I went over the sweet poll that I made and threw on Reddit that over 500 people responded to. So thank you very much for that again. But I'll rehash how the community voted for these teams, and then I'll mention my picks for these groups. Unfortunately, we can't do picks for how the playoffs are going to break out because we don't know how the 1 and 2s from each group are going to match up in the opening round of the playoffs. But we can give a rough idea. Now, Trent, I know you're more of an NA EU guy, so I don't know if you can chime in on how the Chinese and minor region teams are going to do, but feel free to share your picks here as I rattle these off. Now, the community feels that MVP Black is going to finish in first, and Tempo Storm will come out second over CE. LiQuid, RIP, my man, feels that he's not dead, folks. Sorry, that was a bad joke. He feels that MVP Black will also get first, and Tempo Storm will also come in second. He put in parentheses CE if they have 5. They will not have 5. They'll be missing a player. They're only going to have 4/5 of their roster. So he feels that they will finish in third. Bahgz? Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Chime in. I'll go last.
I would say MVP and Tempo as well. I think Tempo has fixed some of their role swapping shenanigans that they were screwing around with in Phase 2. And I think they're going to come in with – I think they've been humbled enough times now that I'm willing to give them one more shot to turn things around and at least make it out of their group.
Well, they looked really, really strong in the playoffs, but it's tough to say. We haven't seen anything since then, and at this point, that was almost 3 weeks ago. My picks are MVP Black and CE, so I'm the only one going against the grain here. Listen, CE got 4th place at the Eastern Clash. They finished behind the Korean teams, Tempest, Ballistics, then known as L5, and MVP Black at that Eastern Clash. But they did finish ahead of their competitive, their Chinese competition, SBT. So, yes, I feel like CE is going to come out of that group. Yes, it's only 4/5 of their roster, but I still believe that the quality from that team will rise above Tempo, who I just don't have faith in their ability to just play at lands. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's in their head, or maybe they're just I don't know. Maybe they can't adapt to a tournament meta. It's mind-boggling. I don't know what it is. Maybe the talent on the roster isn't there, but I feel that CE is going to rise above them. If they don't, I'll be happy. I'm an NA homer. I want them to do well. Moving on to Group B. By ELO, Fnatic is the number 1 team in the world, sitting with an ELO of 1932, is significantly ahead of MVP Black, which was the number 2 team, almost 150 points ahead. Team Freedom, sitting number 10 via ELO with 1591. Beyond the Game, the 3rd seed from China, at number 16 with 1477, and Darksided with an ELO of 1414. That is your A and Z team. The community picked Fnatic to come out as the 1st seed from that group, and the 2nd team to be Team Freedom. LiQuid picked Fnatic as the 1st seed, and Team Freedom as their second seed. Trent picks.
Fnatic and Freedom got like the easiest group they could possibly have gotten. That's not even going to be an interesting group.
It's a shame, and I have to work that day, and I'm a huge Team Freedom owner. It's hung up. Maybe I'll grab it before the show ends. I bought a Team Freedom t-shirt off Teespring. I would like to get a jersey, but they don't have a store set up right now. The Team Freedom's my team right now. It's they're my favorite team. They donate to charity a portion of their winnings. They're run by a charity company, eSports.us. It's cool, man. It's a story I can get behind. Anyways, yeah, I've got Fnatic and Team Freedom going as well. Beyond the Game is missing 3/5 of their roster. So they have 2 guys from the original Beyond the Game roster and then 3 other guys. And I don't think any of the 3 are either from the same team. So they're going to have 4 different teams mishmashing together and throwing them to BlizzCon. It's a shame, but it is the reality we live in with these Chinese teams. They just haven't been able to send a full roster to BlizzCon, I don't think, ever. So Fnatic, Team Freedom. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to miss the games. I have work Friday. Very sad about that, but listen, it is what it is. Group C is the group of death. And I was going to use air quotes, but I'm not, because it is. Let's face it. These are arguably the top. It's 3 of the, by ELO, it's 3 of the top 6 teams in the world stuck in the same bracket. That's insane. Roll20 wins North America Phase 2, and what is their reward? They get to face Dignitas and Tempest in the same group. Congrats, guys. You did so well. Here's a pat on the back and the toughest group at BlizzCon. Anyways, Roll20 is the number 5 team by ELO with a 1701 ELO. Dignitas is number 4 with an ELO of 1740. Tempest sits at number 6 with an ELO of 1698. And then the 4th team in the group, which I haven't mentioned yet, is Red Cannons with an ELO of 1274. Also bad news for Red Cannons. They also had visa issues. They'll be missing Typhex and Letho. I can't remember the rest of his name. Regardless, 2 of their best players unable to go. They're going to only have 3/5 of their roster at BlizzCon. Sad time. Sad day. Community felt like Team Dignitas is going to leave the group in first place, and second place will be Roll20. So the consensus, at least on Reddit, is that Roll20 is going to get out of this group. LiQuiuD feels the same way. His votes are for Dignitas in first place, and Roll20 leaving as the second seed from this group. Trent?
If you've read my blog, you have read 6 interviews with the Roll20 players. You have also seen about 4 other articles about my love for Team 8. I was a massive fan of Team 8 in League. That translated directly to Team 8 in Heroes. And so I am going to have something on the internet that says that I predicted Roll20 as the team to get out of the group of death in first place, because screw all of you and screw journalistic integrity, Roll20 forever, and then Dignitas in second.
All right. Well, that is then you're not going to agree with what I've got to say here, because I feel like it's going to be Dignitas and Tempest. I think, listen, I love Roll20. Probably my second favorite team in NA right now. Justin's my favorite player. Like, just watching him make monumental play after play is just amazing. Like, gets me out of my seat cheering. But I don't.
His interview was super fun too.
I bet. I'm a little jealous that you got to do that. Hopefully we'll get him on the show sometime. I don't think they're there. Listen, the 22. No, we'll never forget 22-0. We'll never forget against that perfect match on Tomb of the Spider Queen against MVP Black. It was NA's coming out party. Like NA is heading in the right direction, but we're not there yet. Unfortunately, I think Tempest, unless they play like unless we get cable Tempest, like there's DirecTV Tempest and cable Tempest. If we get cable Tempest, yeah, I can see Roll20 getting out. But I have faith. They looked really strong in the playoffs. I might have took them to the wire, but they looked really strong. This is a team that can beat L5 and MVP Black when things are clicking. I don't think Roll20 can even say that. Not for a full 5. So I think Tempest is the second seed coming out of this group. I think Dignitas is going to win it. I do want to address something in Twitch chat real quick, though. Stack, I didn't realize Roll20's Road to BlizzCon video came out. Did that come out today? Like within like the last 3 hours? Because I didn't see it when I left the house here at 6, and when I got back at 9, it was. If it was out, I don't know how I missed it then. Because I've been waiting for that. They did all the other regions, and I assumed that they were going to save the best for last. So, all right.
We have no bias whatsoever.
No bias at all. Moving on to Group D. SPT sitting at number 8 in the world via ELO at 1659. Below them is we have written here L5, but it's Ballistics now, as they were picked up again for BlizzCon, and I'm assuming GCWC. Sitting at number 3 in the world via ELO at 1789. Expert at number 7 with an ELO of 1676, and Soul Torturers bringing up the rear with an ELO of 1491. The community felt that Ballistics would come out in first place and Expert would be the second place team coming out of this group. LiQuiuD feels like it's going to be Ballistics and Team Expert as well. Trent feels
like the groups are not fair. Why are there 2 groups that are so simple for the first place team to like sleepwalk their way out of? Like, yeah, it's going to be L5 and like Expert gets a free trip out of group stage as well. Like, why? It's not fair.
Now, SPT is missing 1 player, but I would make the argument that I think they have 2 former players from E-Star, and they've looked really strong in Phase 2 in China. I'm not going to sleep on them. I wouldn't be surprised if they beat out Expert, but my pick is Ballistics and Expert as well. I think, and then again, Soul Torturers, don't sleep on them. It's always they are the Taiwanese team. They picked up 2 players from Deadly Kittens and traditionally have been the best minor region team. Took a couple maps off MVP Black at the Clash. I think Group D, it's not the group of death, but it's probably the next most competitive group. But I'm going to agree with you. I think it's Ballistics and Expert coming out. And now, as we make our way to the bottom here for our picks, I want you to pick your top 2 because there's no third place match at BlizzCon. The community felt like it was going to be Fnatic and MVP Black. LiQuiuD didn't leave his picks, but I'm going to say he feels like it's Fnatic and Roll20.
Ooh,
Trent?
Spicy. I when picking who wins, I like to go with chalk. So it's probably going to be Fnatic and MVP Black in the finals. I don't know. Bracketology wise, is that possible? Or I guess it depends on where they finish in groups.
Here's the problem. Blizzard hasn't announced how they're going to divvy up the bracket, the single elimination bracket after group stages. So we know the 1 seeds are going to be playing 2 seeds when it comes to the playoffs, but we don't know how the 1 seeds are going to be. You know, like how in the NCAA tournament, there's the actual number 1 seed, and then there's like the 1B and the 1C and the 1D.
Yep.
They don't know. They haven't said how they're going to divvy that up. So potentially we could see Fnatic and MVP Black in the semifinals and get the real final. You know what I mean? A match soon. Unfortunately, potentially it could happen. And if it does happen, there's going to be a lot of angry people. So I'm hoping that there's a break enough in between the group stage and when they like build the playoff stage that like Blizzard can like at least like take a look and like if they don't have a science behind it to like I don't know, make a really good educated guess, like say, hey, like these 2 look like the 2 best teams. Let's make sure that they're on the opposite ends of the bracket. You know?
Well, if they're going to do seeding, it should be they need to reseed after the group stages. Like
because they're not doing round robins, I don't think they can. It's just a double. The group stages are just double a limb. It's not gonna. There's no points to like divvy them up that way. So it's just a matter of putting one seed here and one seed on the other end of it, so they don't face each other until the end. What I would do is I would try and avoid all Korean semifinals and all European semifinals and split it up that way. If it shakes out like that, we don't know it will. I don't want to make that assumption, but if it does. You know, you put Fnatic at the top, Dig and MVP Black at the bottom, and maybe Fnatic faces Ballistics in the semis. I'd be okay with that. And then if they had to face Dig or MVP Black in the finals, that'd be exciting. My picks for the top 2, a little against the grain, but not too. I think MVP Black's the best team in the world again. I know a lot of people feel like it's Fnatic until they lose, but I think that they've turned the corner. I think they got embarrassed at the midseason brawl. I don't have any stats to back this up besides the fact that they went undefeated during phase 2 regular season, and they only lost to L5 at the Clash. I think MVP Black's on the warpath, and they're gonna come back this BlizzCon and they're gonna win. I also think Dignitas shows up on lands. I think they changed their shot caller and their drafter from JPL to Bakery. I think that after the clash that they did not get to go to, have looked like a completely different team. They even took Fnatic to the full 5 games online where they are traditionally weaker. Now they're playing on land where they're traditionally stronger. I think they're going to be the second place team. I don't think that they're going to take down Black, but I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. And I think a lot of Fnatic fans are going to be disappointed because they're not going to make it to the finals. They're going to lose in the semis to someone. That's my theory.
Bold call, sir.
All right. That's how I like my coffee, and that's how I like my Heroes BlizzCon finals. Bold. All right.
So something to point out about this, or a question to pose to the people of the internet. I think it is reasonable to say that a portion of the reason that Europe won the midseason brawl was because Korea didn't care about Heroes anymore. I don't think they were 100% sandbagging, but that was not the MVP Black and L5 that we've come to know and love. So the question, one of the big questions that BlizzCon is going to answer is, one, how hard were MVP Black and L5 sleeping during the midseason brawl? Like, are they just going to come in and embarrass everyone and make BlizzCon not fun to watch for anybody except for Korean fanboys? Or do they still not care all that much and they haven't done any research again and they don't know that a Nubarak is good and they don't know how to play him and they get whooped up on again? To me, that's the biggest X factor in all of, like NA is going to crash and burn. It always does. Roll20 is our greatest hope, but it's not going to happen. It doesn't ever happen. But is Korea going to care?
I think they do. I truly believe that. And that's why I'm picking MVP Black. I am still picking Dig to get second, though. While I like to think that Ballistics, who is a team that also plays better on land, makes a run too, I think Korea is going to turn the corner. I think that, yes, the prize pools aren't as big. Yes, the motivation wasn't really there. I think that losing really kind of shook that up. You know, L5 made those changes that they needed, that they made. There's a rumor that Noblesse is formerly main tank of L5 is now coaching MVP Black. I don't know if that's true. The rumors are rumors, but I really do think that these teams have made the changes they need to make and are just a lot more. The desire is there. That's the best way I can describe it. I think the desire is there. And while we're still talking about MVP Black, they mentioned it in chat, and I knew I forgot to put something in the news because I retweeted it and I threw it in our Discord. KSV, the organization that owns the Seoul Overwatch League team, bought MVP Black and MVP Miracle. Forgot to mention that. So
yeah, that's interesting.
They will still be competing as MVP at BlizzCon, but going forward to next year, he's going to own 2 HOTS teams.
He probably can't own 2 HOTS teams.
So that was mentioned too. We don't know what's going to happen because MVP we've mentioned this word several times, this term, grandfathered, where they were allowed to have 2 teams in the league. But with this new ownership structure, he's probably going to have to sell off Miracle.
Because that's like, competitive integrity goes out the window when one organization owns 2 teams in a league. Like, you would never see that in the NFL and the NBA and in anything. You cannot own 2 orgs. And again, to make chat angry by comparing it to League of Legends, like, teams will get a challenger series team, an open division team, to have a second team. If that team qualifies, they are required to sell one of their 2 teams. So, like, there was a Dignitas and a Dignitas EU. The Dignitas EU was a challenger team. They qualified for the EU Challenger Series, or for the EU LCS, and Dignitas immediately had to sell that spot to the highest bidder. They cannot own 2 teams. I can't imagine that Blizzard is going to allow one organization to own 2 teams. So my guess is that after BlizzCon, KSV is going to build the best roster that they possibly can for one of the 2 orgs and then sell the other spot to another Korean entity of some sort.
if LiQuiud is here, he would argue that they already do that, where they take the best players off Miracle and throw them on Black. I think that, you know what? Circling back again, the other thing I wanted to see in the 2018 HGC changes is I want to see paid bench spots. I want at least one.
Yeah, that does need to happen.
Because if you want to take a chance on someone from the open division, right? Maybe it's too risky when you only have 5 roster spots and you're stuck starting that guy every single map, right? And in every single draft scenario. But like, what if you hit a home? Like, if you hit a home, it's a lot riskier when you can't just throw him on the bench and just like bury him because it's not going to work out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a bench position, that you're a lot more likely to go post the amateur scene and see what kind of talent's out there.
Yeah, I think that we'll see that. Most likely we will see substitutes and coaches get paid in 2019.
Okay.
Because coaching has to get more prevalent. Substitute, like most teams don't even have a dedicated sub or a desire to have a dedicated sub at this point. And again, Blizzard is bleeding money with the HGC, so anything that they can do to not have to do that, they're going to do. But I think this year we've seen enough times where a sub had to come in that having substitute players is a good thing. Having them be assigned to a team is a good thing so that you don't get weird, like this guy played for Roll20 this week and now he's playing for Superstars. That's not great.
No, I agree.
So, yeah, I think that will come, but I think it will be, if it's not in the 2019, like if those things are not in the 2019 HGC plans, and Rush, yeah, they are losing. I mean, they're paying $100,000 salary per team, plus all of these lands, plus caster salaries, plus observer salaries, plus production staff. They are paying a lot of money to run profit from it. They're making more profit now because of cheering, and cheering has been insanely successful, and they have the Disney XP partnership, which is helping. So they're not losing as much money as they were 6 months ago on it. But one thing I've learned in esports is everything is 12 times more expensive than you think it is. Like literally getting hotel rooms and airplane fees for all of these teams to get to BlizzCon is 12 times more expensive than you think that it is. Like running a production every week for the HGC is 12 times more expensive than you think it is. It's just a rule that I have learned in esports, is that things are more expensive than you think they are. And the HGC is not immune from that. They have done some things to offset that, but they are still, I would be willing to stake my reputation on the fact that they are not generating profit from the HGC.
They got to sell that advertising space, man. They got to sell.
They never will. No esports organization, no esport that's owned by the company that makes the game runs meaningful ads as a part of their thing. Like nobody's league is brought to you by, Purell hand sanitizer or whatever. It's just not a thing.
Well, I'm tired of seeing the same murky ad over and over in between the games. I wouldn't hate seeing a little ad for Tide or something.
I don't disagree. I'm all for it, and it will be interesting to see what the Overwatch League does, because I think that is the place where you will see experimentation. It's already such an experimental league that's so different from everything else that's being done, and the owners of the organizations are such different people from the owners of most organizations that I would imagine that is where we will see more of those types of experimentation.
All right. Well, that we won't find out until the year turns over.
Yep.
Running out of time, but very quickly, I wanted to give ourselves an opportunity to defend ourselves against all the haters on Reddit.
We have no defense, dude. What we learned a lesson about methodology is what we did.
So, DB Smiley put out an HGC Finals preview via version with an ELO version, and he put out a personal version where he went from his gut. Now, we did our math version because we don't know how to. I can't do ELO. I don't know that arithmetic and algebra and numbers. And I
have a communications degree.
So do I, actually, funnily enough. And it didn't involve math to get it. Math of the Storm put out an aggregate of everyone's power rankings. Ours probably threw them way off. But real quick, if I were to go with my gut and I were to write a separate article to go on Heroes Earth with my gut on how I feel the power rankings would actually play out without doing some crazy rating system that we did, I would put them this way, guys. Fnatic would be first. Mm-hmm. Black would be second. Yes, I know I said Black's going to win the tournament. All right. Fnatic would be first.
Seeding is different than power rankings.
Ballistics would be third. Dig would be fourth. The next tier would be Expert, fifth. Tempest, sixth. Roll20, seventh. Freedom, eighth. SPT, ninth. CE, 10th. Soul Torturers, 11th. And then Tempo Storm at 12th. At the 12th spot. Deadly Kittens, 13. Can't read my handwriting, but Dark-Sided, 14th. Beyond the Game, 15th. And Red Cannons bringing up the rear. So clip that, throw it in our Reddit thread, and take it as you will, people. And with that, I mean, Trent, unless you got a handy 16 team ranking list that you want to throw out there.
No, way to throw that on me all of a sudden. I'm going to stand. You know what? I'm going to stand by our insane methodology and say anything that happens that's even remotely close to that, we're smarter than everybody else. If Red Cannon suddenly upsets a bunch of people, I want there to be something on the internet that says that we called it.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually just erase like that Twitch clip and just be like, make a new one that says, "I told you so."
Mm-hmm. We had complete faith in our methodology. Y'all shut up.
All right, and with that, guys, we're gonna start signing off. So thank you all for listening to Trolling HGC. It's a weekly podcast about Heroes of the Storm eSports. It's a member of the Trolls.gg podcast network. We stream it live on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TrollsGG, every week on Wednesdays following the Nexus Trolls around 9:30 p.m. Eastern and 6:30 p.m. Pacific. People can follow me on Twitter at Bahgz HGC or watch me stream on twitch.tv/Bahgz. As well, if you enjoyed tonight's show and are interested in Blizzard's other esports offerings, consider subscribing to the Weekly Blizz, where my buddy Gwaz and I cover all of Blizzard's esports offerings and can be found on all podcast sources. LiQuid can be found on Twitter at LiQuid GG. That's IUDGG. Remember, the I becomes before the U. He spells it a little weird. He tweets whenever he's about to do anything interesting, including a new idea at Daz Hodson he has. They'll be double dating with their wives in various games on Friday nights. Right now, I believe they're streaming Guild Wars 2. I watched that the other day before I went to work. We'd also like to thank all our Patreon supporters. If you like the show, and you're looking for a way to support us, you can do so in a few ways. One of those ways is patreon.com/TrollsGG. Additionally, you can subscribe to our Twitch channel or cheer us with some bits at twitch.tv/TrollsGG. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you can happen to find your podcasts online. Or if you're looking for a way to support us non-financially, you can leave reviews of the show on any of the previously mentioned platforms. Visit our website at trolls.gg to watch this and past shows along with past video streams, which can also be found on our YouTube channel. If you're interested in being part of the Trolls GG family, we are looking for a writer currently. and a social media manager. More information will be put on our webpage in the next few days, and I'll be sure to tweet it out. This is LiQuid tweeting it out, not Bahgz. If you want to hang out with us and the Trolls community in-game, just type /join TrollsGG in Heroes of the Storm or join our Discord channel, trolls.gg/Discord. We are testing a new channel in the Battle.net beta client, and we'll tweet out information about that when it's fully ready. For announcements about the show and Heroes of the Storm eSports news, follow us on Twitter at Trollin HGC. And finally, that is an extremely long outro. If you need to get in touch with us, hit us up on Twitter. DMs are open, or email us at trollin@trolls.gg. Peace out.